Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cherno. Welcome back to my C++ series. So first of all, let me just say huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100,000 subscribers. It's been quite a journey. I first started YouTube in 2011 and I guess more seriously in 2012 and even more seriously probably at the start of last year when I started the C++ series and the OpenGL series. And so it's been quite a journey and I really do feel very thankful and very blessed to have 100,000 people following this channel. So huge thank you to all of you. And today, what we're going to talk about is just kind of a bit of a quick Visual Studio tip and just a tip in general for development and for debugging. And that's going to be about breakpoints, but not just about breakpoints. If you don't know what a breakpoint is, definitely watch that video. But this isn't just going to be about normal breakpoints. It's going to be about conditions and actions that we can apply to breakpoints. So by conditions or conditional breakpoints, what I mean is we can actually tell the debugger, I want to place a breakpoint here, but I only want the breakpoint to trigger under a certain condition, something in memory basically that's going to meet my criteria. If that's the case, then please trigger this breakpoint. And then actionable breakpoints or action breakpoints are just something that will allow us to take some kind of action, generally print something to the console when a breakpoint is hit. So there's kind of two, I guess, types of action breakpoints. There's one that lets you kind of just continue execution while printing what you want. So for example, let's just say I wanted to log the mouse position. What I could do is every time the mouse position is recorded, because like every time a mouse move event happens, for example, I could have that breakpoint actually print something to the console but keep the program running. Or I could get it to like print something to the console but still break the program. So still kind of pause execution of the program so that we can inspect other things in memory. So again, breakpoints in general, make sure you watch that video because if you don't know what a breakpoint is, this isn't going to really help much. But action breakpoints and conditional breakpoints are really, really useful as kind of a further debugging tool. Now, everything that you can do with these breakpoints, you can actually do in code, okay? I could just write an if statement, for example, that checks something, and then obviously just put a breakpoint inside that if statement, and if that if statement is true, then the breakpoint will be tripped. Or I don't even have to put a breakpoint. I could just even write debug break or something like that, some kind of compiler intrinsic that actually will break the debugger if it's attached at that given line of code, kind of like what we do with assertion macros. That's one possibility. And with action breakpoints, again, printing something to the console, obviously you can do that in code. But where this really comes in handy is where we might have gotten our program into some kind of state that is a bug, perhaps, and we want to inspect certain kind of properties to figure out what's caused this bug, or like why am I in this state, or what even is this state, right? Like what is my stuff set to? Why has this happened? And obviously, if we were to actually kind of decide to add code to our code base, we'd have to terminate the application and then recompile it. And then that would be an issue because maybe we couldn't get into the state again, or maybe it was really, really difficult to get into the state. And I mean, generally it will just slow down our workflow if we have to keep kind of stopping, recompiling, adding code, like, and then getting up to the state that led up to like what exactly we want to debug and all of that. So it's a huge issue, and this really does help us out a lot. So let's just dive into some code. What I've got here actually is the source code to Sparky, which is a game engine that I made about 3 years ago. And then what I'm going to do is I'll just launch it and kind of show you guys what we're dealing with. This is just an example project, really could be anything, but I thought I'd actually use kind of a real world project instead of just doing something like, I don't know, some kind of weird hello world app that probably wouldn't show you much. So all we have here is really just this scene which has some graphics in it when it finally opens. And then we have like, you know, some metal and plastic balls of various roughnesses and all of that. And in fact, I think the OpenGL version of Sparky is a bit not as good as the DirectX version, so there might be some artifacts. But anyway, the point is we have kind of a 3D app here. And what I want to do is, while this is running, without actually closing it, I've just decided that I want to debug the mouse position because the position of the mouse just seems to be a bit wrong. So what I'll do is I'll go to the code that actually records the mouse positions, which in this case is with Win32 input.cpp. Let me just close this memory view to make some more space. And then what I'm going to do is find the mouse, let's just say the button callback, right? So every time a button's clicked, this gets called. And we have this kind of mouse position X and Y that gets set here. Now I want to debug that. So what I'll do is I'll jump to the end of here. And actually, of course, I'm not going to add code. All I'm really going to do is I'm just going to put a breakpoint like on this line, for example. I'm going to right click on this breakpoint and then go to conditions. Okay, or in fact, well, let's just log it first. So we can go actions, okay? And conditions and actions are both here. So we can actually use a condition and an action together, right? You have to click on actions first and then add a condition to it. Or otherwise, we have to actually add something and then it will let us kind of do both. But anyway, let's just start with an action. So we'll log something to the output window and we will decide to continue execution. So the way that we do this, if we have variables that we want to do, and this actually shows you a bit of the syntax, what we can do is just use curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets we can put in a variable name such as x, or input manager arrow m underscore mouse position dot x, or something like that. X is just obviously easier to write. So we'll do x, and you can do things like cast, so we can cast to a float if we want. We don't have to. In this case, it's just going to be an integer mouse position. So we'd see the value either way properly, but I'll cast it to a float just for fun to show you that you can. So x and y, okay? So x and then comma y, and you can see that I'm kind of encompassing these variable names inside curly brackets. And I can, you know, add some other text like the mouse position is that, okay? And there we go, we have that. Let's hit close, and the application is still running, obviously. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click, and if we go into our output window, you'll see that it actually tells us what our mouse position is. And if I drag this up a bit more so you guys can see, and I go back to my program, and I just click all over the place, let me move this. In fact, I'll resize it, make it smaller. You can see I'm clicking all over the place, and it's telling me what my mouse position is, okay? And it looks like that callback's being called twice for some reason. But anyway, you can see that I have the mouse position being printed in real time while my application is running. And I guess the big takeaway from this is, obviously I could just add code that prints that in the actual source code of the application. But the cool thing is, I haven't stopped my application, right? I haven't actually had to recompile any code or anything. This is just while my initial application was running, I've managed to print additional data to the console. The other way of doing this would be to just add a regular breakpoint, click, and then look at, you know, the broken program, like while it's paused, and look at the variables, but that would be way too long, right? Here I can just click all over the place, literally, and you can see I'll just get all the data I need immediately, so it's really, really powerful. Now, to test conditions, let's just say that I want my mouse position to only be printed under a certain condition. So maybe if x is greater than 500 or something, because I know it only happens on the right side of the screen. So I'll go to my conditions, and you can see I've enabled both conditions and actions here. And I'll just say x greater than 500, okay? Oops, that's 5,000. X greater than 500, okay? Just a conditional expression, can be any Boolean statement. And then I'll just close that by hitting close, or just by closing it there. And then if I go back, you'll see that if I click on the left side of the screen, nothing gets printed. But as soon as I click on the right side of the screen, it prints my value, okay? So that's a way for us to only evaluate breakpoints under a certain condition. And of course, if I come back over here and go to actions again, I can uncheck continue execution, which means that when I actually do click on the left side of the screen, nothing happens. On the right side of the screen, it'll print my value, and then also you can see my program is now paused so that I can look at all the values I need over here if I really want to. Okay, so that's it. That's conditions, that's actions. I use these all the time when I need to because they're just really powerful and they're just really good for speeding up your workflow. Again, nothing you can't do via other means, but it's just if you're in the middle of something complex, especially if you're working on a large application, you know that shutting it all down, recompiling the code, going back, it's going to take forever, and it may not even get you to the point where you have that bug in, like, you have that program in that reproducible state for the bug. So this is something that is incredibly useful and everyone should be using. One thing I will say is that conditions are very, very useful for things like loops. If you have an update loop, right? Like this is a game, right? So I have an update loop that's running 60 times per second and I want to catch a particular condition. That's almost impossible to do with breakpoints. Like maybe I'm just kind of traversing this whole node hierarchy of all of my entities in my game, and I have like 5,000 entities, and I just want to break on the one that's called player or the one that's called enemy 405, right? Because that's the problem one. Well, that's going to be so difficult to do manually. You'll put a breakpoint, you'll keep hitting F5 until you get to the point where the name of the entity equals, you know, enemy 405, right? But if you put a condition down which says only activate this breakpoint if name is enemy 405, well, guess what? You've just done that instantly with absolutely no work. I will say that this slows down your program a lot. So if you keep putting down conditional breakpoints and actionable breakpoints and all this, like in a real-time application, you'll probably drop to like 5 FPS or something like that. It will lag. That's just how they work. They're slow. But obviously they're a debugging tool, so usually that's not going to affect you too much. If you are worried about performance, then just stop your application, recompile it with some code which handles this for you instead of using the debugger for that, because having the debugger attached and doing this is quite slow. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can hit the like button. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well to get updates about all my videos and stuff like that. Patreon.com/the Cherno is the best way to support this series and this YouTube channel. So thank you so much to all of my patrons which make this series possible. In the next video, we're going to be talking about some more Visual Studio debugging features that I want to kind of introduce, because we're going to be starting some other series soon, which is going to be pretty big, and I want everyone to be kind of comfortable with Visual Studio and with C++ to the point where we can debug our code effectively. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.